Hope you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
So should I proceed? Why? Because we have spent quite some time. So
yes.
I'll just be, if you want me to start going slowly, I'll go slowly so that when people come along the line, they will get to.
Yes, we can start slowly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. You have any introduction to make so that before I proceed?
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Harrison, Francis, Stephen, and every other person watching. My name is Johnson Wall, and we are live on Safeoclock Health and Safety Interactive Workshop. We host this event every week where we gather together virtually to discuss health and safety related topics. So today we'll be talking about selection of personal protective equipment. And I'm sure you will learn a lot today and you have a lot to contribute as well. So without wasting time, I will allow Mr. Stephen to continue the presentation.
Okay, good evening all once again. I'm Stephen Francis, as you can see from the screen. Based on the topic today, we will be discussing about selection of personal protective equipment, which is also known as the PPE, or commonly known as the PPE. Basically, when we look at this topic of discussion, it's all about how, as a professional, how do we select this personal protective equipment? Because I believe as a professional, we have a major role in terms of making some decision with that of the probably procurement or supply chain department in order to ensure that the right PPE, are being procured or supplied to the workers on site, depending on the industry. So, and when we talk about selection of PPE, there are so many factors that need to be put into consideration. Okay, so those factors will be making it as an agenda for the discussion today. Okay, so now when we look at what we have on the screen, we will see the selection factors. Okay, and we'll be discussing it based on how it appears. Okay, on the screen. So here we have the legal requirement. Legal requirement is a factor for selecting PPE. Okay, hazard identification and risk assessment, the right type of PPE, compatibility, fitting, size, and comfort, worker participation, which involves the involvement and feedback, durability and longevity. Okay, I repeated it twice. That's an error. Then climatic change, or climatic factor rather. Then we have the cost factor, we have the threat level, industry-specific factor, we have emergency situation. And we cannot talk about all these factors without considering the training on usage, maintenance, and storage. So all these things is what we'll be discussing in summary, at least trying to consider our timing. Because when we really want to talk about PPE, is also, when it comes to safety, is a very broad area to be discussed. So, but I will try to my possible best to streamline within the confine of the time I have. So from our basic knowledge and our understanding, we understand that personal protective equipment is very crucial in the workplace, which helps employees or protect them from hazard that could cause injury or illness. And however, selecting the right personal protective equipment for worker is very important to ensure employee safety in the workplace. And however, we should be able to remember that PPE is the last line of defense, as we all know from the hierarchy of control. Okay, it remains at the bottom. Okay, but it is also important for us to know that there are some hazard or risks that need to be controlled that as much as other hierarchy of control is important, I still see personal protective equipment also very important, because sometimes it works in synergy or it works in symbiotic relationship with other form of elimination. Because for example, if we are looking at the administrative control that has to do with permit to work system, for example. So for you to deploy that administrative control of permit to work system, you discover that even the PP would have been captured inside the process. So as part of the control. So if it is not captured inside, it means the permit or the administrative control will not be effective. So when we look at it, is in as much as it's in the last stage of control, okay, it's as important as any other part or hierarchy of control, as the case may be. So from just basic knowledge, what PP is all about, we could refer to, it could be referred to as a personal protective clothing, helmets, goggles, and other garments or equipment designed to protect the wearer body from injury or infection. The hazard addressed by protective equipment include physical hazard, electrical, heat, chemical, biohazard, and even airborne particulate matter. Protective equipment may be worn for job-related occupational safety and health purpose, as well as for sports and other recreational activity. However, there are some benefits of using PPE, which is to prevent unnecessary injury, like I've said earlier, in the workplace, to protect employees from excessive chemical exposure, prevent the spread of germs and infection diseases, improve employee productivity and efficiency, and help business to comply with what regulatory requirements. Okay, so now one of the factors that I've listed in the agenda is the regulatory requirement or compliance for PPE. For example, in the UK, in the United Kingdom, you have the Personal Protective Equipment Regulation 1992, and also the Personal Protective Equipment at Work Amendment Regulation, because it was amended last year to include some responsibility for the employer. Because when you look at the PPE regulation, there was a category of Limb A and Limb B workers. Okay, to be more specific, like the Limb B workers are like other contractors, subcontractor, who are working within the site, or maybe of the client or the contractor. So in this case, what this amendment provides is that the employer, okay, is responsible in providing PPE. In so many cases, the subcontractor they come with their own PPE. Okay, so this new amendment has erased that aspect and also placed some responsibility for employers and also the employee. Because if the employer provides you PPE, you have the responsibility as an employee to also maintain and use it in the right way, in order for you to preserve the lifespan as well. So all these things are covered in all this regulation, okay? And also the regulation gives some certain standard and quality, of this particular PPE, right from the design to production and the usage. So we could look at even in the UK, it complies with the product supply legislation, which is a regulation 2016-425, as incorporated into the UK law, which set out the essential health and safety requirements that must be met before PPE products can be placed on the Great Britain market. Okay, the Personal Protective Equipment Enforcement Regulation 2018 provides a system for the enforcement of the 2016-425 regulation and are enforced by the Health and Safety Executive for PPE intended for the workplace use in the Great Britain. Now, when we come to the US, we have a lot of regulation, especially the Code of Federal Regulation, the one that covers the general industry. We could see the 29 CFR 9101.3132. We discover that there's a requirement for the general industry, and also for each of the specific body parts, PPE, like the face and eye protection. We have for the head protection, we have for the foot protection, we have for the electrical protection, these are things that we cannot have enough time to go in details into all those things, but this is just to give us a reflection of the requirements, the legal or regulatory compliance that need to be done depending on the wherever we have been practicing our profession. Like this one covers within the United States by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, okay, which everybody is all aware of. So we have the regulation that covers the construction industry, okay, that deals with all aspects. Here we could see occupational food protection, electrical protective equipment, head protection, hearing protection, eye and face protection, etc. So they come like that. So these are the regulatory framework which was developed or designed, you know, to be able to for employers to comply with in order to ensure that the workers are well protected in terms of personal protective equipment within the work site. Okay, and also in the OSHA also covered the area of the maritime industry. So you could see that there are industry-specific standards, especially when it comes to OSHA. They don't joke with all this. So they cover all areas for general and all industry. So there are lots, but I just try to bring out little that we could just flip our eyes with and be familiar with as well. So like I've said, when you look at all this regulation, they make specification, because when you go to the healthcare, what is required in the healthcare is different from what is required in the construction. So that is why we need to go back and look at what the law says about providing PPE when it comes to the healthcare. Because if you use the PPE for construction, for that of the healthcare, it won't just work. It won't work, okay? Because of the nature of the industry, there are variation in terms of hazard and risks present within different industries. So that is why, as a professional, any industry will find ourselves, that should be our focus. We need to look at the regulation that covers our industry, look at what the law says when it comes to personal protective equipment. Then with this, we can be able to give comprehensive advice to our employer or the management on what to do. Okay, so it is very important. You cannot delve into selection without putting the legal or the regulatory compliance framework or standard into consideration without before doing any selection of PPE. So that one is the number one. It's number one requirement we must consider. So secondly, we have to look at hazard identification and risk assessment. It is important. Having considered the legal requirements, the second stage should be hazard identification and risk assessment, which is the number second part of the selection process. You cannot select a PPE for somebody who work in a construction site, okay, without considering the hazard, because without you carrying hazard identification, because if you don't do that, how will you know the PPE that will be provided for work at height? Like the safety harness, you are looking at fall arrestor. So these are things. This is construction. Now looking at the healthcare, you don't expect somebody in the healthcare sector to be using helmets. Okay, they have their own cap, which they wear, especially those that works in the lab and all that. So different industry have their own hazard. So that is why, after looking at the regulatory requirements, we have to delve into the hazard identification and risk assessment. So by the time we identify the hazard, we assess the risks. Then we'll be able to know who is exposed, how long they are exposed, how much they are exposed. You know, we also going to determine the potential harm to the worker if exposed to this hazard. You know, we then, after doing evaluation of the severity and frequency of each identified hazard, they will be able to understand the level of risk, you know, that this activity will be presenting to the workers. Then from there, we'll be able to know, okay, these guys will be working at maybe 10 meter, 15 meter, then definitely we'll know the kind of PPE that will be provided. These guys will be working on confined space. we know the kind of PPE will be provided. These guys will be dealing with chemicals. Having understand all this hazard, then we decide and select properly what kind of personal protective equipment that should be provided for the worker. So it's very, very important. This is a number 2 rule you cannot, or factors that we cannot run away from. It's a must requirement. So also, having done the hazard identification and risk assessment, now you understand what kind of hazard or risk is present. So at that point, we'll be able to say, okay, let's select the types that we need. For example, if you look at the picture that is projected here, you see that this is a proper gel for the lab. For those who work in the laboratory, okay, you discover that these are the PPE, basic lab gel, okay, safety goggles, you know, so they have the gloves, we have the long pants, enclosed shoes, hair caps, face shield, because you're going to be dealing with chemicals. Chemical could spill, you know, so there's also a kind of chemical resistant apron. So you don't expect this kind of PPE in the construction site, right? Which I believe. So this one now is peculiar to those who work, especially in the laboratory. And as we all know that personal protective equipment is categorized based on the area of the body as well. Okay, so when we identify all those things, we know, okay, these workers, they will need head protection. What kind of head protection? These workers, they will need eye and face protection. What kind of face protection? Are we just going to provide safety goggles, or we are going to provide, what's it called? The face shield. So the hazard will be able to tell us, having done all those identification and assessment, we'll be able to tell, based on the risk, you know, and hazard that has been identified, we're able to tell exactly what will be provided. Like I've said, the same thing applicable to respiratory protection. There are activities that need respirator. There are activities that need just normal N95 masks, some just this other normal nose masks. Okay, and when it comes to hand protection also, like I said, because we will not have, if we have to discuss going to all industry one like that, definitely we are going to consume more than 2 to 3 hours, okay? But in a more summarized way, I'm trying to bring it out this way, okay? Like for the hand protection, for example, there's always a difference between those who works in the lab, who works in the process industry, those who work in construction, even within the construction, those who work in electrical, you know, they need to have an electrical resistance and gloves. Even those who do chipping work, who do grinding work and all that, because of vibration, they need to have an anti-vibration and gloves. Okay, so all these things is what, as a professional, we need to understand. So when we understand all these things, then we say, okay, these are the activity that will be going on. There will be electrical, there will be welding. If there's going to be welding, hot work activity, we know we need an apron, we need leather gloves and all that. So all those things are very, very important. And not as a professional, we know all these things, but this is an opportunity for us to refresh. This is an opportunity for us to recap most of those things we already understand. And so on and so forth. We talk about food protection, hearing protection, body protection as well. Like if you see from the picture, this working at the lab, they need to protect themselves using the lab coat or suit. So now the other factor, after selecting the type, you now look at compatibility, okay? When we are selecting, it is very, very important we look at compatibility. Now, what is compatibility? For an example, you find out that those who are working, workers who are working who needs respirator rather, and also at the same time, we need the safety glasses. So you discover that it is very, very important that compatibility is put into consideration. Because if I'm going to be using a respirator and the safety glasses I'm going to be using will compromise, you know, the lid or the seal, you know, around the respirator, then the purpose of that PPE is worthless. Okay, so all these things need to be put in consideration. Like I've said, if you could see on the screen, for example, ensure that respirator can be worn with safety glasses without compromising the seal. So the fitting, those compatibility, they must be able to be compatible with each other. But if the two or more than one PPE and two PPE cannot be compatible, then it's not safe. Okay, so all these things we need to put into consideration. There are a lot of PPE we combine in order to be able to work safely, for the workers to work safely. So those things need to be put into consideration when we do our selection. Compatibility is an important factor to be considered. Also, another factor to be considered when we select PPE, there we'll be talking about the fitting, sizing, and the comfort. Proper fitting is critical for PPE effectiveness use, okay? And also, we should be able to provide a variety of sizes to accommodate different body type. Because I can remember in my site, I just requested for my technicians, we requested for a safety shoe, okay, because they are long overdue. So, and you see, we bought different sizes, but when those things came, we discovered that some will say they want 44. The 44 that they brought was oversized, so we asked them to select. So they select those ones that were oversized, we sent back to the company, they brought another size. So those things we need to be very, very conscious about it. Not that because this guy said, oh, this thing is too free, it's free. You now say, okay, just manage like that. It will not be comfortable because sometimes if there's an emergency, it needs to run. Imagine you're having a safety shoe and your leg is floating inside. So it poses another risk. So it's very important we have the proper size that fits or accommodates different body size or shape and things like that. Also, ill-fitting, uncomfortable PPE can lead to non-compliance. Yes, because if you provide a PPE for me and it does not fit me, obviously, and I'm not comfortable with it, definitely, I will be shying away from using it. So thereby increasing the risk of injury or accident from such an individual. So, and also as a professional, we need to ensure that PPE is available at various sizes that I've said, which I've discussed about. So and I'm going to set an example. Maybe you provide a coverall that do not fit correctly and could increase the risk of entanglement if sleeves are too long. For example, you provide a coverall and it's too long, the person has to fold and is working on the rotating part equipment and things like that. So along the line, mistakenly, we've seen a lot of videos, even in LinkedIn, things like that happen. So people go with loose clothes and all that. Before you know, the clothes will get entangled and the person gets into the rotating part. So this factor is very, very important. It should be put into consideration. We don't just say we are providing PPE, we provide oversized, we provide PPE that are not comfortable. It's as a professional, it is not allowed. As a professional, these are the knowledge. These are the knowledge we should be bringing to the table of the management, because some of this management, they don't understand all these things. That is why we are employed. And basically, we know our responsibility. Most of our responsibility is advisory. Okay, yes, though we cannot force them for anything, but we need to give advice and also document or record our evidence when we do that, so that in case the management is trying to be smart, you have your own self to protect, especially for those of us who come from this part of the world where we know the implication when accident happen. Okay, so another factor to be considered is workers. Okay, workers need to be involved. Workers need to participate in the selection process, which is a very, very important factor, and their feedback is very, very important because you don't select PPE without considering the workers. Okay, so because you need to have some conversation, you need to engage them. They need to give you feedback, what they feel, probably in terms of quality, in terms of what they want. Because they understand this safety very well, even as we feel maybe they don't understand. So it is very important we involve them in the process, so that they can be able to give us a good feedback on their comfortability and usability of the chosen PPE, okay? Because their input also will help us to identify issues for improvement if needed, okay? So involving these workers, when selecting PPE, they will be more likely to understand the important and the use, because if you don't involve them, definitely they're likely not to understand how important this thing is all about. So by doing this, we encourage a culture of safety where workers will actively participate in their own protection, which is very, very important, which should be our general aim. Because if they understand the importance of their protection, they're going to work safely without injury, and everybody will be happy at the end of the day. And the company will also make profit, you know. So another factor to consider is to evaluate the durability and longevity of the PPE. You know, when we consider durability of PPE, especially if it will be subjected to wear and tear in the workplace, PPE should be able to withstand the condition it will be exposed to. Okay, so for example, when you discover that there are some activity that will be done, you know, with the exposure to, let me just say, sunlight, you know, temperatures and all that. So you cannot use a material, you cannot go for a PPE that has a material that cannot withstand such kind of problem, environmental condition. Okay, so if we just go for PPE that do not meet such standard or quality, then it means we'll be predisposing such inferior PPE to damage or less durable. And the risk is that when this worker uses it, then definitely the risk, we are tripling the risk of injury within the workplace. Okay, like for example, when we look at the longevity issue, for example, let's look at the PPE in terms of the safety element. I know there are a lot of professionals who don't know this, okay, that the PPE has expiring dates in terms of elements, okay? Most people know it has expiring date, but they don't know how to go about it. So if you check each safety element, you see at the right-hand side, you know, depending on the manufacturer, you see there's a kind of embossment there that tells when this PPE is expected to expire, you know, looking at the lifespan. Okay, now when you look at this PPE now, you see this October 10. Sorry, this month 10, which is October, and it was produced in 2018. So they use the last 2 digits of the year, okay? So which is 2018. Where this arrow is facing 10, which is talking about the month of October. If it is here, then it's November. Then if it is here, this December. Then it goes round the clock from January to December. So now, and there is this general belief that PPE should be used within 3 years. In some industry, in some regulation, they gives it a wider year to up to 5 years of expiration. And apart from that, some other factor like where it is exposed to, the nature of work you are using it for. Somebody who uses this in a facility, you could expect that, okay, it should last for up to 3 to 5 years. For those who work in the construction and all that, using some kind of activity, then you don't expect to use this particular element for more than that. And some school of thought believe that it is when you start using the PPE, that is when you start counting. Okay, so some believe in when it is produced, the year it is manufactured, because it could be manufactured and be in the store for more than 1 year. So the safety element has not been subjected to some either wear and tear or anything like that that could have made the lifespan or durability ineffective. So all those things we need to put into consideration when we are selecting the right PPE for the workers. And also, a climatic factor is one thing we should also consider. Okay, like the pictures on this slide, I just focus on because we can talk about summer, we could talk about winter. Okay, but I just use this picture. In Qatar, we are too familiar with summer, so I decided to come up with those who work in area when there's winter. Okay, so for example, in hot and humid environment, workers may be required to use a lightweight and breathable PPE to prevent heat stress, which we all understand. But in this case, with the picture I have, we focus on those during the winter and during the winter environment. So they need to provide insulated and waterproof PPE, may be necessary for warm protection. Because if you go to other countries that are experiencing winter, much rainfall and all that, they must work, they must continue to work. But the kind of PPE we provide, we need to consider the environmental or climatic factor, during the season or throughout the year. We look at the conditions. Okay, in Qatar, we mostly experience heat. Okay, so we know the kind of PPE. We cannot go and provide this kind of or recommend this kind of PPE when we know we experience more of heat during summer. So these are the things we need to put into consideration before we while selecting PPE. Okay, so climatic factor is very, very important. We cannot rule out that factor irrespective of where you are located. It's either you experience winter or you experience summer. So another factor we need to consider also is the cost factor. It is we need to find a way to consider the cost of PPE, its impact on the company's budget. Because the truth is that, yes, we need to look at cost benefit and all that, but at the same time, we have to look at so many things need to put into consideration so that we don't go beyond even the company's what the company has made for budget. Okay, as a professional, we need to advise, we need to look at what to do, where to make changes without compromising the safety of the workers. In as much as we believe that safety is paramount, it is important also to find or to strike a balance between cost effectiveness and worker safety. I think with this, we'll be able to have a proper selection of PPE. Another factor to consider again is the threat level. Okay, for example, for those who work in construction, high rise, the level of threat or risk associated with such tasks or within the environment of such task might be a very high risk activity and may require more robust specialized PPE. Okay, why low risk situation may allow for a lighter or more general PPE gears. Okay, like now what we'll see here, we can see the fall arrestor. Okay, so for an activity that require people working at height on a high level, high rise, the chances of them falling is very high and all that. So, there are a lot of this threat level need to be understood, or understand rather by we professional to be able to determine, what are the kind of protection or PPE we need to provide. So when we see a very high threat level, which we know that these guys will be working at a very far distance, then we should be able to select and recommend fall arrestors for such kind of activity. At least this will go further to help and protect the employee. Okay, so there are activity you discover that might not need fall arrestor. So these are the things we need to be doing as a professional. Okay, so this will also put us in front of the management that we understand what we are doing and why they employ us as a professional. And also, we need to also look at industry-specific factor, okay? Because the truth is that, like I've said earlier, I mentioned earlier, every industry has their peculiar hazard. And with this, it gives us an idea of what we should be looking at when it comes to PPE. Like what we have here, this is a medical PPE kit. You could see that it's far, far, far different from what is obtainable in the construction industry or either in the maritime industry. Okay, so a lot of differences are there. As a professional, wherever you find yourself, these are things you need to look out for. You will not say you are taking your knowledge of what you have in construction and start applying it in the healthcare. If not, people will just look at you and laugh and say, what is this man saying? Okay, so like I've said, there varies. So the kind of gloves you use there mask, gown, all those things will be very, these are things we all know, you know, but for the purpose of refreshing, you know, our knowledge and remind us of all those things, it's very important I make mention of this. And also, we should also remember that each of these industry, they have their own guidelines and regulation, okay? And when we comply with all those things, it will project that, yes, we are carrying out a good practice. Now, also, we need to consider emergency situation factor, okay? Any consideration in terms of emergency, because there is no industry you find yourself that you will not have a kind of emergency response plan. So in terms of the emergency response, emergency situation, we also need to consider the PPE. If you have emergency response team within in-house, which means we have to provide this. If we are subcontracting it out, then it is fine, depending on the agreement, if it's your company that's going to provide the kits for them, or it's their home company that's going to provide for them. So all these things need to be put into consideration, because, like, for example, with the picture we have here, we can see that this PPE, this what they have here is specialized PPE that is needed for specific scenarios, like such as fire-resistant clothing and for firefighting situation. You know, when they talk about fire incident, it has to do with a specialized kind of PPE being provided for the firefighters. So you can see that all the safety gears they have, they are fire resistant. Everything complete are fire resistant. So such kind of situation or factor must be put into consideration. You know, so if you find yourself in an organization where what people specialize in is to fight fire, okay, emergency response. So you see that what you should be thinking or what you should be doing should be more different from what people were in the healthcare and that of just ordinary working on the construction site. So emergency situation factor is very, very vital and important. This must be put into consideration. If we know we don't need it, then it will be struck out. Now, another important thing is that having put all this, because there is nowhere, there's no literature you check in the internet or anywhere that talks about all this factor about selecting PPE, that you don't talk about training, maintenance, and storage. Okay, so it is very important as we select, we should be able to train the employer, the workers on the usage, maintenance, and storage. So when we look at the picture here, you can see maybe a kind of brief short-term training, you know, just to give us an idea what we're talking about. It might not be a proper, maybe formal being in a lecture room or things like that. It just be in the form of the way we do our toolbox talks and all that. We should be able to give them this information on that maintenance and how to store this PPE. It is very, very important that we do that, so that they should understand the limitation and capability of the equipment. Okay, like you see in the other picture, see how this PPE or these safety gears are kept. But we know a lot of sites, a lot of places, things like this are being violated. You know, in most cases, where we enjoy these things and appreciate them well is when you find yourself probably in the oil and gas, also in the process industry. But I know in more of construction, we don't see this. We don't see this proper things like that. So we need to keep advocating for that, you know, and when we keep doing that, I think it will be a good thing in promoting that information. Then in conclusion, I want to say, as a professional, we should be able to document selection and the training that we provide, okay, by maintaining a record of PPE selection, training, fit testing for each worker, especially in the area of using respirator. You know, so it's very, very important. Before somebody can be assigned a respirator, you need to carry out a test, a fitting test, you know, because otherwise it's like you are sending the workers to ease or aggrieve without doing this proper fitting and testing. Okay, so also we need to document changes in PPE requirements based on involving workplace hazard, because things changes, when process changes, when location changes, when activity changes, we need to do a lot of changes. We have to need to review so many things, because if the activity changes and the hazard or the risk is increasing, then we need to make some kind of amendment adjustment to procure more PPE to be able to neutralize such risks or hazard that the changes we present to the workers. And also we need to regularly review and update with periodic reassessment of the workplace hazard and effectiveness of existing PPE, just like what I've said earlier. And also we need to adjust PPE selection as needed to ensure ongoing safety. And also for continuous improvement, we need to continuously seek way to improve workplace safety, including evaluating new PPE technology and best practices, because as technology evolves, a lot of changes, a lot of things. So we need to be up to date with all these things. If you are in safety and you're having a knowledge for the past 10 years and you have not improved yourself, you are not following the best practice, you are not following changes in terms of technology, in terms of legislation, then I believe such kind of individual is backward, and your knowledge cannot be accepted at this present time. So as a professional, these are things we should just give ourselves opportunity to do, so that we can keep enhancing our knowledge and provide good, robust, comprehensive advice to any management we find ourselves to be advising. Thank you very much for listening. I'll like Mr. Johnson to take the floor at this point. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stephen, for that wonderful presentation.
You.
The floor is open now for questions and contributions. Welcome, Mr. Samir and Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Samuel is my colleague. We are here together in Saudi Arabia. I think other ones, they are busy. I don't know why they couldn't join us. But I think this was a good one. I'm even trying to go and visit a friend while I'm also listening with the workshop inside the car.
Okay, that's.
I would like to thank Mr. Francis who take this opportunity and give us good things to join this this webinar, and we learn many things from this. Thank you, Mr. Stephen, also.
Thank you. Thank you for attending, and we are happy you learned something.
Cannot trust you.
Okay. Harrison, are you there?
Good evening, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Stephen and every other person in the house today. I really want to appreciate Mr. Stephen for this amazing section. Honestly, it was really amazing. And I don't have any question, except maybe a little contribution. It was, the session was well thought out and well dished out, and it's an amazing one. So I just want to give kudos to Mr. Stephen for a job well done. Okay, I will be adding one or two lines. Okay, we've been able to understand that even though the PPE is the last line of defense, okay, and it is still very, very important because it's going to work in conjunction or in collaboration with all other control measures, right? To get the better benefit of these control measures, okay? And that there are several factors that determines the selection or that determine how we select our PPEs, okay? The nature of job, the regulatory standpoint of view, on the particular PPE that is required for that particular activity. So all of these factors, as Mr. Stephen has rightly mentioned, are well noted and agreed upon that they are correct. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Stephen. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for that wonderful contribution. Okay, I want to add one or two things. Mr. Stephen has also mentioned that training is very, very important. Now, the point I want to add in that training is what do you need to communicate to the workers? The first thing is you need to let them understand why PPE is necessary. Because in some situations, they think that PPE is just a ceremonial. So this is one of the points that we must ensure that they understand why using PPE is necessary. Now, another point you need to add to that communication is what type of PPE is necessary. So it's not just about telling them, my friend, wear your PPE, wear your helmet. You need to, in the event of your communication, ensure that they understand why it's necessary to use the PPE. Then the second point you need to let them understand is what type of PPE is necessary, depending on the activity being performed. You need to let them know that if you are going at height, full body harness is necessary. Helmet is necessary, and you must ensure that you use your chin strap. So you need to let them know the type of PPEs that are necessary, not just say wear your PPE. It needs to be effectively communicated. Then the next point that should be properly communicated is how to wear these PPEs. Because you might believe that they ordinarily know how to wear it. I was amazed in some events or some situations, you see people they are putting on reflective jackets, but maybe during the winter or during the cold seasons, they put on their the jacket on top of the reflective jacket. So how to wear this PPE is very, very important. Don't just overlook it. Don't think that everybody knows it. Another type of PPE is full body harness. You might think that is common, that everybody can wear it. So during the communication or during the training, we should take our time to ensure that they understand how. Use practical demonstrations. Let them do it, let them demonstrate it, and ensure that they understood how to wear the PPE. Then the next thing we need to let them know is the limitation of the PPE. This should make a part of the communication points. The limitations of PPE, so that they will not rely entirely on the PPE. I've seen in different scenarios where somebody wearing a safety harness thinks that he's now a Spider-Man, that he can stand on top of the toe board or on top of the handrails. If you ask him, why are you doing that? He said he already have full body harness. So you need to let them understand the limitations of the PPE they are using. That even though you have this PPE, it's limited. The protection it can give you is limited. So this should make part of the point we need to communicate to them. Another point you need to communicate to them is how to adjust and how to remove this PPE properly, because it contributes to the wear and tear of the personal protective equipment provided to them. When they remove it, how do they remove it? Do they take time to remove it gradually? Do they just pull it from every angle? So how? Demonstrate, use practical measures, practical communicating measures to ensure that they understand how to remove the PPEs properly. Then another point that could be communicated is how to properly maintain the PPEs, how to properly dispose the PPEs. After using the PPE, where should it be put. For example, chemical hand gloves. People that were working with chemicals, after using the chemicals and the hand gloves, and where should they dispose it? Most of them do not understand that the chemical hand glove or PPE use should be part of the chemical waste. They think that because it's maybe it's a combustible material, then it should go to combustible waste collection bin. So we should try to emphasize on the disposal of these PPEs, where it should be disposed, how it should be disposed, the removal measures and procedures, so that the PPE that have been selected, that have been purchased, are well used and well disposed when no more in use, and well taken care of. Okay, these are some of the points I wanted to add. So the floor is still open for someone else that needs to contribute.
Good evening once again. This is Mr. Harrison. I just quickly want to add something that we also have what they call this PP policy statement of what call it, policy statement for PPE. Okay, and that's that policy statement is going to tell us the need for PPE and individual responsibility for this PPE. For example, responsibility of supervisors and employees, hazard assessment and PPE selections, employee training, cleaning and maintenance of the PPE. So our PPE program, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So, okay. So the PPE program will surely be built around our policy statements for the organization. That's just my little contribution. Just as we have the OHS policy, we also have the policy statement for the PPE on an organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison. Okay, we are getting to the end of the program. If there's someone else that wants to contribute, you can raise up your hand or unmute yourself and contribute. Okay, without further question and further comments, there will be no need keeping us waiting. So I want to use this opportunity to thank everyone who has attended today. We'll have a recorded version of this training in our YouTube channel, Safeoclock. So also, if you need a CPD certificate for this webinar today, just send me a WhatsApp message, then I will be able to provide you the certificate. Okay, so thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Mr. Stephen, for that wonderful presentation. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for contribution. Thank you, Mr. James, Sadiq, Sami Ahmed, Mr. Samuel. Thank you, Mr. Francis. So
you have to thank yourself.
Have a very important. We have another important topic coming up next week. So join us same time, 6 p.m. on next week Thursday to discuss another topic.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Joseph, Stephen, and thank you, everyone.
Thank
James.
you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity and this interactive session that has really gone down well with learning. I think by next week we'll make ourselves available to join and also try to bring more of my team guys to learn from this forum and improve their safety system towards the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Stay safe, okay? Stay safe that side.
Yeah, so I don't see my friend.
Stay safe that side there.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.